Hello friends, it's Phil from the Lawn Service. I want to tell you a little story. Now, I used to look after a lawn that was absolutely beautiful. And it was cut daily by the client. It was fed regularly. And it was just a beautiful asset to the house. They also had two dogs, two massive, I think they were Rottweilers, and to me I couldn't quite work out how the garden was so perfect at first glance with two Rottweilers. And what I discovered was the Rottweilers weren't allowed in the garden. Well, they certainly weren't allowed on the grass in the garden, and how crazy is that? Got a massive garden, and it was a massive garden, two Rottweilers that actually aren't allowed to play on the lawn. And the reason why they weren't allowed to play on the lawn was quite simply that basically when they peed on the lawn, they were two bitches as opposed to two dogs, and two bitches particularly are brilliant at destroying lawns with their pee, is that these two Rottweilers, which were absolutely beautiful, basically were destroying the lawn with all these patches of wheat. And the client basically said to me, look, where I basically put the dogs is turning into an absolute, literally a shit alley, and it was pretty uncomfortable basically, it wasn't really working. And he sort of said, have you got any suggestions about how I can introduce the dogs to the garden whilst also look after the lawn? So there are two parts to that kind of question that I thought. It's like, one is, can you actually have dogs on a fine-ish family lawn? Or can't you? Or can you actually let the dogs on the lawn and somehow maintain the condition of the lawn? So we ran a few experiments. Now, the first experiment started off with little doggy rocks. Apparently they sell them in garden centres, and they claim that if you put doggy rocks, or whatever they're called, in dog water, basically the dogs drink the water and it turns their pee alkaline. So it stops the burning. Because what burns out the lawn, what makes it go brown, is basically a really intense level of nitrogen of dog pee. My view that doggy rocks is actually a commercialisation byproduct of fixing a problem. The problem is quite often the brown patches materialise from really dehydrated dogs. So what we tried was, we did the doggy rocks. They didn't work, obviously, because we knew that anyway. And what we then started to do was talking about, why don't we overwater the lawn every time the dogs go for a pee? Now that seems like a bit of a crazy idea, but this client was so prepared to do it that every time the dogs went out for a wee, he watched where they weed and he put a bucket of water on the peed area. Now that worked out. What happened was that spread the pee, and you could actually see little tufts that was spread about sort of 30-40 centimetres of better growing grass. So what I had to do to counter that was basically put extra feed onto the lawn to give it a better feed overall. So what we were doing was shoving a load of nitrogen into the lawn to compensate for the dog pee. So the thing that we hadn't kind of explored enough was the fact that the dogs were peeing and they were dehydrated. So what we did was, we got some bowls, we put them into more places in the house, on the back step outside the house, near the dog beds, in the utility room, in the garage. We put fresh water bowls all over the place. That meant the dogs were actually drinking an awful lot more, and the conclusion is the dogs needed to pee more, but they were peeing more, less concentrated pee, and that sort of fixed the problem. That actually fixed the problem more than you'd realise. So the tip, if you've got a pair of dogs, gathering of dogs, whatever, is that if you want them to use the garden, what you have to do is you have to encourage them to drink more, encourage them on hotter days to drink more. And that's the best way to do that, is make sure the water is fresh, make sure it's clean. You know, a glass of water that's been sitting by your bedside table for 4 days, it's going to be full of dust. It's not going to be very pleasant. And dogs are the absolute same. If you give them clean water, they will lap it up, and in doing so look after your lawn. If you give them a clean bowl of water every couple of days, it's not very pleasant, is it? So that's my tip, is basically make sure the dogs get plenty of water, make sure you encourage them to drink it, and you should find that kind of keeps the lawn in good order. If that doesn't work, and you have to replace certain sections of the lawn, the best way to do it is not to just assume that by pouring loads and loads of water onto the lawn it will fix the problem, because it actually won't. Because what's happened is, by that really concentrated dog peas, it's technically contaminated the root zone, the soil underneath. And a lot of people try and basically fix dog pea areas by putting more grass seed on. What you have to do is actually cut out a small section of turf, usually cut it into a square, because then it's easier to work on. Either get a replacement piece of turf and slap it in, which is a bad idea because it quite often grows a new type of grass that doesn't reflect your existing lawn. Or what you should do is get some grass seed, and you should reseed that patch that you've cut out. Dig out 5 to 10 centimetres of the soil that's underneath the contaminated area, so all the soil's clean, and then reseed it, and then reseed a kind of a broadcasty area around that damaged area. And what you'll find is that the seed kind of blends in with the new patch, and it all kind of works together. So that's my thoughts basically, is that if you've got a dog, look after the dogs. Don't worry about the lawn too much. Maintain the dog's hydration levels. That will help to minimize scorching. But if it does get scorched, you have to basically take out the root zone underneath the lawn, and then you have to reseed or returf on top of it. That's the best way to get relatively instant success in days, if not days, 21 days to get seed to germinate correctly. So anyway, that's yeah, if you've got a dog, love your dog and love your lawn at the same time. Cheers, bye.